Coming up next, taking care of business. How can your company stay motivated and mindful? Don't miss your turn on the economic road to recovery.
Finding ways to cope in a changing landscape is vital for customers to thrive. Motivating our teams and even ourselves leads to better outcomes for all. Now we can understand and manage customer experience to help make the most of our very best customers. By utilizing best practices on the road to economic recovery, we have an opportunity to catapult our customers to greater achievement. Now we can maneuver our way forward, guided by progress all around us. Together, we will be successful on the road to recovery.
Hello and welcome back. Joining us now is the creator of the Happier Method and Happier at Work, best-selling author of Happier Now and Gratitude Daily, founder and CEO of Happier Inc. Please welcome Natalie Kogan.
Ramon, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here with all of you. And I am here to talk about how do we get through the storm that we're all in? Because that is the analogy that I've been using. We are going through a storm. All of us are dealing with so many challenges and stress and uncertainty. And it can be heavy and it can be really, really difficult. But there is a way to make it through. And there's a way to make it through not just with resilience and not just with survival, but there's a way to make it through the storm and make ourselves and our businesses even stronger. But it's not by pushing more or like trying harder or like being really tough on yourself. The way to make it through the storm is with compassion. And it begins with self-compassion. So how do you feel when you hear that word self-compassion? Okay. I don't know about you, but when I used to hear self-compassion, I hated it. Because, you know, I grew up in Russia. I came to this country as a refugee when I was 13. I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. So self-compassion sounded very like woo-woo to me, like, oh, whatever happens, happens. I never have to improve and grow. And, well, basically, I thought it was for wimps. And I couldn't have been more wrong. Because self-compassion has nothing to do with letting yourself off the hook. Actually, self-compassion is simply treating yourself as you would a friend, acknowledging that you're a human being, that you are not perfect. I know it's hard for some of us to acknowledge that. But more importantly, treating yourself in a way that aims to reduce your struggle and suffering. Did you know that there's actual research that shows that when you treat yourself with compassion, when you're struggling or when you've made a mistake, for example, you are twice as likely to work harder to improve. You're more motivated. So why is self-compassion so powerful? Well, when we're not spending all of that emotional and mental energy beating ourselves up, telling ourselves how we're not doing this enough or that enough, how we should feel a different way, when we're not wasting our energy on all of that, we actually have more of our emotional energy to move forward, to decide what it is we need to do to grow, to improve, to deal with whatever challenges are in front of us. And that's what makes self-compassion so powerful. And so that's the first thing that I encourage you to do is as you're going through this incredibly difficult time to treat yourself with self-compassion. And one of the tangible ways to do that is in any given situation, when you find that inner critic piping up or that harshness inside of you, just pause and think, how would I treat a friend who's dealing with this challenge? What would I say to a person if they were someone I cared about? And that's a really enlightening moment for most of us because we realize we're much more kinder to others instinctively than we are towards ourselves. So that's the first call to action that I have for you. But there's another reason to practice self-compassion. In addition to the fact that it makes you more motivated and more resilient and more likely to get through challenges. And that is, we treat others in a way that we treat ourselves. So the way that we interact with other people, the way that we bring ourselves to situations involving other people is rooted in how do we treat ourselves. So the relationship that you have with yourself is the kind of relationship that you cultivate with others. So if you are always harsh towards yourself, That's going to seep out in your interactions with your colleagues, your teammates, your business partners, your family and friends. If you cannot practice compassion towards yourself, it's going to be challenging to practice compassion towards others. And right now, during this challenging time, compassion is the only and the most important business strategy. Do you know that there's research that shows that when you do your job with compassion, whatever it is, you are much more effective, and the people you interact with are much more likely to follow your lead? I love this research about doctors. So when doctors prescribe a treatment to a patient and they do it with kindness and compassion, the patients experience less pain, they're more likely to follow the prescription, and their outcomes are better. Think about that. Think of the power of compassion. It actually helps the outcome for patients be more effective. And again, the reason it's so is because compassion allows us to connect as human beings first. Before doctor and patient, before salesperson and someone who is buying the solution, before a leader and an employee, compassion connects our humanity to each other. And when we feel seen as human beings and recognized, when our struggles are acknowledged, that helps us to be better at what we do. That helps us to trust each other more, and that helps us to actually work better together to get through a challenging situation. So this is my call to action for you. Lead with compassion. And now, the thing is, being a compassionate leader doesn't mean you have every answer or you can fix every problem or that you're supposed to. Being a compassionate leader simply means that you show up with your humanity first, that you care about other people and their well-being, and that in every single interaction, that is the first thing that you do. And by the way, I want to tell you what my definition of a leader is, because it might be a little bit surprising. To be a leader, you don't need to manage people. You don't need a fancy title. You don't need some kind of complicated org chart under you. You are a leader if you positively, intentionally affect other people. You are a leader if you show up every day and you think about, how can I do something that elevates or supports others? That is what makes you a leader. And so I want to share with you, I've been using this shorthand just for myself as a guide for how to be a compassionate leader during this challenging time. So it's an acronym for the word ACT. So the word ACT, A-C-T. A is for acknowledging challenges. Begin every day by just taking a moment and acknowledging how you're feeling. Being aware of your feelings instead of judging them. Just feeling what you feel, even if it's difficult. There's so much research that shows that when we allow ourselves to experience our difficult feelings without running away from them or, stuffing them down or, getting distracted by scrolling social media, when we actually allow ourselves to experience a difficult feeling, we get through it in a shorter amount of time and we feel it with less intensity. And bring that gift of acknowledgement to others. So when you interact with other people, acknowledge how they're feeling. Ask them how they're feeling and create space for them to share and be there to listen. So that's A for acknowledge, challenge, and struggle. C, care. Care about your own and other people's well-being. If you do not fuel your well-being with compassion, and if you don't show up caring about other people, you simply cannot be at your best and you cannot help them be at their best during this challenging time. So care. When you ask someone how they're feeling, actually care about the answer and pause long enough to really listen. And finally, T in the word ACT, T. Teach by example. Practice self-compassion and talk about how you're practicing. When you make a mistake, be open about how you feel and also be open about how you are treating yourself as you would a friend instead of a really opinionated and harsh judge. And do the same with others, right? When you see someone struggling, teach by example, tell them how they might treat themselves as they would a friend. So this is just a shorthand that I've been using for myself, right? The word ACT, easy to remember. A, acknowledge your own challenges and acknowledge other people's challenges. C, care. Care about your own and other people's well-being. And T, teach by example, by practicing compassion and practicing compassion in your interactions with every single person you meet. So one of the questions that I've been getting so much recently is there is so much uncertainty and there's so many challenges, like how do we keep going? Even compassion sometimes doesn't feel like it's enough. Well, my encouragement for you is to recognize that there are always challenges in life, right? Right now we're going through a huge challenge, but there are always challenges in life. And I wish I could remove them for you, but I can't. But the way that you react to challenges, The way that you react towards yourself when you're going through a challenge can help you remove some of the struggle. And this is why I'm inviting you to practice self-compassion and to lead with compassion, because that's one of the best ways that I know for how to, yes, accept the challenges that are coming our way, but to minimize some of the struggle that we're experiencing. But here's the thing. It might be helpful to think that, okay, I'll just focus on helping other people. Or it might be tempting. I can tell you sometimes I get this thought of, it feels kind of selfish to care about my own well-being, right? Shouldn't I just be focused on my team or my partners or my family? Well, here's the thing. You cannot give what you don't have. You cannot give to others what you don't have yourself. If you are not practicing compassion for yourself, if you are not fueling your own well-being, you cannot show up at your best for other people. It's simply not possible. And so I want to invite you to recognize that cultivating your well-being, your emotional health through self-compassion during this challenging time is not selfish. It is your responsibility to every single person you interact with, every single person you work with, and every single person in your community. Because when you lead with compassion, beginning with yourself, you help yourself and everyone else be more resilient and get through this incredibly challenging time with actually more learning and strength.
Hey, Natalie, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We appreciate that. Audience, listen, check out my interview with Natalie when you get a chance. It's going to be here on the GPS online platform in the resources area.
Now for an SAP special report. Happy employees make for happy customers. X plus O data. That was the idea behind a transformative multi-year project at SAP. Turn insight into action and improve experiences for customers, partners, and employees. 10 use cases were selected as a starting point, including Customer Net Promoter Score, measuring customer experience, SAP S/4HANA Cloud Integration, measuring user experience, My Team Dashboard and Feedback Catcher to facilitate the employee experience. The goal for 2020? Create a holistic view that shows how employees are experiencing the processes across a company and determine what to do about it. Because happy employees lead to happy customers. A goal that applies to every company, not just SAP. Be sure to check out customer experience and all the SAP solutions in the track area at the Global Partner Summit.
With us today is the Managing Director for the EIU in Asia, Global Chief Economist, and former Oxford University lecturer, Simon Baptist. So welcome, Simon. We're so glad to have you with us today. How are things in your part of the world?
Things are good. Of course, we're struggling through the crisis like everybody else and trying to make the best of it and looking forward to what will be a new normal.
From your perspective, what will the impact of these lockdowns be? And please, if you can give us some insight, when will the economy recover?
Economists have long run out of superlatives to try and explain just how significant this current crisis is. At the beginning, we were asking, is it going to be as bad as 2008, 2009? Then we were asking, is it going to be as bad as the Great Depression of 1929? And we're now looking like we're going to surpass all of those events in terms of the scale of the economic dislocation that we're seeing now. Don't expect the global economy to get back to where it was at the end of 2019 until probably the end of 2021. So we are looking really about a 2-year recovery period, and it's going to be a long period of slow growth for certain countries. Now, what we're seeing at the moment is unprecedented drops in GDP growth through the second quarter, particularly for those countries outside of Asia that came into this wave a little bit later.
From the interviews EIU has conducted, Simon, what are some of the best practices from companies that can help us navigate the crisis?
The place for companies to look for best practices right now is China. And there are some experiences there that I think are going to be applicable to the rest of the world. Those companies that have been better able to automate their processes and have been able to accelerate automation plans have been able to come through this crisis in better shape. I think China probably has done something like 2 years worth of automation in the last 2 months. A second key trend we are seeing out of China is companies have been less affected if they've had more resilient supply chains. Companies everywhere, and I think governments everywhere, should certainly be looking at their own supply chains that they're part of, that they rely on, and having a look at where are potential bottlenecks in terms of individual companies, critical components or products, or reliance on certain geographies. But I do think everywhere we are going to see a trend towards more sharing of data, particularly with governments, and it's going to become a requirement of opening up. And this will include data that perhaps in the past we would have not been very happy to share with companies or with governments directly.
And as you speak with various companies, how are different sectors being affected, and are there any pockets at all, Simon, of optimism?
Of course, most sectors have been very negatively affected by the COVID-19 crisis. But it is possible to find some patches where there are more opportunities for growth than elsewhere. Distancing measures and shelter-in-place orders have meant that more stuff has to be done in the virtual world than in the real world. So trends such as e-commerce, the shift of retailing from the high street online, that is going to accelerate.
Looking ahead and past the immediate crisis, I'm curious, what economic trends do you see being important later in 2020?
The first one, of course, is the US presidential election. This is a big international geopolitical event in any year. But even more so this year, Donald Trump and Joe Biden would run very, very different administrations. A second key trend to think about is the US-China trade war. We did have the interim trade deal agreed in January between the US and China, where essentially China committed to purchase huge minimum levels of US goods such as natural gas, oil, soybeans, and other farm products. Now, with the collapse in demand in China, both from the industrial sector and from consumers, those purchases are very unlikely to be met. And we've seen with the latest monthly trade data out of China, purchases are only running at about a third of what they need to be in order for China to meet those aims this year. A third key event is Brexit. Again, something we spent a lot of 2019 talking about, has not gone away. I think now a hard Brexit is more likely than not. It was a hard deadline to meet anyway, to negotiate a good trade deal because of the timelines involved. Now, with politicians and also policymakers and public servants are very distracted and occupied rightly with COVID-19, those negotiations are not going to progress.
Wow. Simon, as we end our discussion today, what's that one last thing that our partners should think about doing today?
I would go back into the office and think about supply chains. So this is not just my supply chains and where my risks might be, but where I could be a risk for other people. Now, perhaps for your company, there are opportunities for you to be that company that provides the diversification for somebody else. Maybe there's customers you have not worked with in the past or wanted to work with or used to work with, perhaps, where you could be their diversification. And so I think now is a good time to get in and talk to those kind of prospects while it's top of their mind to think about resilience.
Awesome. Simon, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate being with you. And listen, ladies and gentlemen, for more information on economics and business impacts, please feel free to go to www.eiu.com. Now that's what I call taking care of business. Be sure to stick around though, because we have an incredible closing act headed your way right after this.
Coming up next, SAP runs best with SAP partners. Hear SAP CEO Christian Klein's vision for SAP's future. Discover how innovation and transformation will help drive your business forward.